I remember my dad had heart surgery, and yeah, Well, we get started in a couple minutes here, but welcome to the Ohio River discussion series. If you're just joining, go ahead and turn your camera off, mute your microphone, and introduce yourself in the chat. And we will get going in a couple minutes here. Thank you. Okay, welcome to the Ohio River Basin discussion series. We're going to go ahead and get started here. If you're just joining, please mute your microphone and turn off your camera, and then introduce yourself in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and get us started here, and then we'll turn it over to, we have 4 speakers today. And this is the second webinar that ORBA has done this year. So this focuses on water and trees, and the connection between water and trees. So I wanted to just give you a little overview of ORBA. The Ohio River Basin Alliance is a collaborative of stakeholders with a united voice for the Ohio River Basin, consisting of across 14 states with over 500 members, to sustain healthy ecosystems and vibrant communities within the basin. That's our mission. I want to thank our current chair of ORBA, Chris Lorenz with Thomas More University, and our past chair, Craig Butler with the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District. Thank you to our sponsors for the webinar, Orsenco with Nick Callahan and Adam Scott hosting the webinar for ORBA today. And then our ORBA Kid Working Group. This is the Knowledge and Education to Inform Decisions Working Group. And we have several members of our KID group that help put the webinar series on. And that's Perry Thomas with Kentucky's Association of Environmental Education, Chuck Somerville, the Dean Emeritus from Marshall University, and then Nick Callahan with Orsenco, and myself. I'm Jen Bowman. I am with Ohio University's Voinovich School, Leadership and Public Service, and I'm the Director of Environmental Programs. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first speaker here today, Alicia Trexler. We're going to go through each of the speakers. We'll do questions after each presentation. And if there's time at the end, we can circle back with open questions, but we will do time for questions after each presentation. So Alicia, if you want to pull up your slides while I give your bio here. Alicia Trexler is employed with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, WPC, as a watershed project manager. She holds a Bachelor of Science in biology and a minor in chemistry, over 20 years of experience in water quality and biological monitoring, watershed project management, implementation, among others. She owns a farm in Indiana County where she raises grass-fed beef with her family and manages the farm in a way that it can be used as an example on how conservation practices can be worked into a farming operation and include native plants. So welcome. Thank you for being here, Alicia. I'm going to turn this over to you.
Hi, thank you, Jen. Today, I really want to talk about rallying, repairing, restoration. After 20 years of sharing the same message, sometimes I feel like I've said it enough that it should be happening, but really new people come along all the time and there's new places to continue doing restoration work. So today I hope I inspire people to talk about repairing restoration and keep it moving forward. Again, I work for the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. Our watershed office, the main office is in Indiana County. You'll hear from one of my co-workers after me in another one of our offices, both of us from the Watershed Conservation Program, which is more tailored towards water quality improvements and best management practice installation to help streams and improve water quality. This is a snapshot of me over the years. I am certified to scuba. We do freshwater mussel research, hellbender salamander studies. We do visual assessments, electrofishing. I've been able to do a lot of different things in my role and also incorporate my love and passion for agriculture when I talk about water conservation. As I said, we in the watershed department, we talk about watershed improvements. We do a variety of things for natural and stream habitat restoration, aquatic organism patches, agricultural best management practices, and one of my favorite things to talk about, which is repairing restoration. You can see I've helped plant over 80,000 riparian trees across 200 sites. I've helped a lot of acres and have done it for a number of years. The little person in this photo is my son, and we'll see him later and as he's grown over the years to plant trees and restore areas. And it's kind of neat to have youth going with you as you learn and implement practices, because he could go out and put a tree planting in himself. And I hope everyone can learn how to do it. This is the areas that we've planted trees. Some of them have been small plantings. Some of them have been 5-10 acre plantings, but it's a shotgun all throughout Western Pennsylvania. And some of the places where you don't see a lot of our bullet points, it's because there's other partners that have actively been planting in those areas. So just because it doesn't look like I've helped plant a tree there, it doesn't mean it's not going in. How do we fund these projects? It's a combination of private donation, foundation funds, local, state, and federal dollars. We write grants. Sometimes there's gifts that are given, but it's a dance of matching projects and finding the right landowners. But pretty much the funding's out there for repairing restoration, especially in Pennsylvania. They found it to be one of the cheapest ways to improve water quality. And so it is very much supported by a lot of the partners. Today, as I said, I want to raise repairing awareness among our listeners, help maybe give you some words to talk about repairing buffers to people you know and people you don't know, a little bit of promoting buffers, and a real quick overview. I could talk whole workshops on how to evaluate a site, how to design a site, or how to coordinate a site, and I'd be happy to do that and advise people, but that's for another day. So again, this is my son as a big guy out there helping me check some buffers for some, he needs to do community service and for his honors school, and helping plant trees is a great way to do that and get youth involved. But I want to remind everyone, we're going to have to repeat the message. I have a neighbor next to me. He's a dairy next to my farm, and it took them 7 years of watching trees grow on my own farm before they were ready to listen and asked about having trees planted on their own property. So it takes sometimes years to keep saying the same thing before the tree can get planted. So just so we're all on the same page, what we're talking about of a riparian area, it's that transition area between stream edge and upland forest. You can see in my red bracket I have on this slide, it shows a riparian area that is open and without trees, and it also shows a treed riparian area that doesn't matter whether the trees are there or not, the riparian area always exists. And our goal is to take it from a less healthy to a more healthy spot. Visually speaking, this is a state park in Indiana County. They wanted to stop mowing this area along the lake. That's also a stream that's over on the right side of my screen. And overall, my goal is to help people want to go from yards and open lawns to this in a couple of years, and 7 to 10 years later, you have it growing in. This is helping people have a different vision of an area and what can take place, what a yard could be, and accepting that this looks a little bit different, but still healthy for the environment. I'm moving my screen, too far. There we go. So promoting riparian restoration. We all interact with riparian areas on a regular basis. We might not even know we're in a riparian area. Like this dog lives in a riparian area. He's really concerned about what's going on, and they start asking a lot of questions like, why is my bank eroding? Why is my house going to fall in? And often people might not think about it until there's a problem. But I like to remind people that riparian areas can be gateways. They are, that's, like I said, that transition area from streams where people might want to go and recreate, and from the places they park. For me, I like to recreate in riparian areas. Some people like to recreationally mow. They don't know what else to do with their spots along the stream, so they mow it. And this is a funny story because this site right here, I met the landowner. We were doing some water quality research, and this landowner said they go upstream to fish because they know the trout don't stay down here because there's no shade. And I had a nice little conversation with them. I said, hey, maybe if you still want to mow your lawn, but if we add some trees and things in there, the fish would be here. And it was just, the person didn't even realize what they were saying, and that they could have fish on their part of the stream with a couple of trees. We also have livestock in riparian areas. We feed them, we water them, and we may or may not realize that we're also transferring nutrients in a way that's not necessarily healthy for a stream when we do this. Agriculture happens. We grow crops in riparian areas. We spread manure, and there's setbacks and things that can be done to help.
I'm also listening to that Orbo webinar.
We also play in our riparian areas. We put parks, our kids run around in there. We live in them. We travel in them. We do things in them for better or for worse. And I want everyone to start thinking about the riparian areas in their own backyard and what's happening with them. Where is your favorite riparian area? You may be able to see the stream, you may not in your riparian area, but you need to think about what makes you passionate about helping that riparian area, and then you can sell that to other people and help them want to protect the riparian areas. Again, riparian buffers make a difference when we plant trees along streams, whether we plant a narrow strip or a wide buffer. They could be up to 300 feet wide. They have all sorts of water quality protection. This is a visual chart of the same concept. A narrow buffer can offer some of the bank stabilization and stream habitat, but when you start making your buffer wider up to 150, 200 feet, that's when you get the most bang for your buck. But you also have to talk to the landowner and what they want. They may not live beyond, their yard goes up to 100 feet, so they may not have enough room to give more than 35, 50 feet. So it's a balancing act of how can you protect your buffer, but also keep the people that live there happy. We're also protecting it not only for water quality, but for the wildlife, both terrestrial and aquatic, that live in and around riparian areas. And the people, we have to talk to people about riparian areas. If, like that dog, the one that lives real close to it and realize something's going on, they may ask questions, but when people live away from a stream or they don't see it, they don't necessarily want to think about why trees are being planted along the stream. And so I like to talk to people beyond the stream edge, help them understand. So when they see a buffer going in, they understand that that's to help them, not just that landowner that's getting the tree planted. So you would think that's pretty easy. People usually get on board and say, yeah, I want to plant trees along a stream, and that would be great. But then they don't think that they own a stream. And that's one of the biggest sales issue I have with talking about buffers is that, yeah, everybody agrees trees need to be along streams. But then when I ask the landowner, they're like, I don't own a stream. And they may own something that looks like this picture in the slide where they don't call it a stream. It's just a ditch with water running through it, or that's a creek, or in Western Pennsylvania, it's a creek. It could be a tributary, a spring, a seep, a pond, a lake, a river, all of these names. So when we say stream bank plantings, everyone cues in on the word stream, but we really need to call it waterside plantings, or just make sure you say more than just streams to help everybody think about the water that's flowing through their property. For example, these two pictures are both streams. The landowners here are treating them not necessarily as streams, but basically ditches that you need water to get from one place to another because it's inconvenient for one thing or another. And it's, again, the landowner may realize that they've done some changes to a stream, but the people at this park or going through the golf course might just see that as something that's done to get the water out of the way and not realize that we could put a buffer along a stream. We can do something different to improve water quality. So helping landowners understand that a stream in poor condition still has value and it can be improved. That's a big key here is, again, talking to people and saying, hey, let's put a repairing buffer on that and helping see the potential beauty in a stream that might be having a bad erosion issue. We're trying to reach the perfect riparian area, knowing that not every place that we plant has the room or the ability to have a full forest put on both sides of the stream. But we also need to acknowledge that the landowner is willing to do some improvement practices, but also have some agriculture or live nearby. So it's balancing the repairing area and just working on fixing the not so perfect places. This is, again, another stream that isn't necessarily seen as a stream, but we can still work with the landowner on the left side of the stream, help them plant some trees. We can avoid the power lines. We're not moving the road, but we could talk to the township about their dirt and gravel road program. So even the places that don't look the best could still potentially be improved. We just want to make the less than perfect areas look better. This is a stream. This is actually in north central Pennsylvania. The stream ditch was helped and cleaned out, but upstream of here are wild trout reproduced. So this isn't, all this sediment is going downstream, and it was a conversation that needed to be had with the township and a landowner. A landowner may not even know any better to not let this happen. So this is why we need to continue our education work on promoting good water quality. Again, we need to work on improving best management practices. Herbicide and spraying may have a desired effect of helping water move out of the way, but it's also moving a lot of soil and visually not quite as pleasing as maybe having pollinators and other things growing in an area. But we have to have conversations with communities about what they hope to see. And knowing that it's more than just planting trees, it's changing a stewardship practice. So maybe a site isn't suitable for planting trees, but that doesn't mean we need to dig out a stream and put the soil on the side of it. We can find the balance and have it be functioning buffer as well as a place that people need to do other things in. Stormwater and runoff often get talked about in an agriculture setting, but it's also an urban problem. We have sediment issues everywhere we look, whether it's in town or out of town. And the passionate part of me for agriculture talks to a lot of ag operators and says, I know you're getting the finger pointed at you a lot for erosion issues, but we can talk to everybody about it. It's not just a farm issue. So again, back to this slide. Are you ready yet to put a buffer on your own property? Hopefully you're thinking about a place where you live or know and say, are there things that I can do to improve a riparian area? A stream I didn't even think was a stream. And let me know at the end in the comments whether you have places that you'd want to plant. So I hear a lot of reasons on why someone may not want to have a buffer put in, and it could be public understanding, the right of ways in the way. Snakes are really a big issue. People don't want snakes showing up, and they think if I plant trees, I plant snakes. But I can tell all the reasons why not to plant a tree, but I like to talk to people about the reasons why they could. We know change is hard. Having this conversation, let people talk to you about why a buffer might not work, and then we have a conversation on how it could work. There's lots of opportunities to have the conversation, but we need to be out on the landscape talking to people. We also have to help ag operators think differently about what they're doing with their property and how the conservation and agriculture can be done together. They don't have to compete with each other, but they can complement each other. And one of the things I like to do, ag operators want to say they're growing something, and I don't want this riparian area to be exclusive from growing things. And we can talk to ag operators and say you're growing clean water, you may be growing a food source. If the elderberries or some of the edible things that are put in buffers can be used for medicinal reasons, we're maintaining soil and putting it back on the land. The land isn't idle if we're planting it with a purpose, and that's one of the big sells when we're talking to ag operations about repairing buffers. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about some site visits and what we need to do when we go to visit buffers. We walk around with the landowner, we get the general lay of the land, listening, telling them that we're going to plant bare root or potted stems along their property. This is a variety of the plants that we plant along there. It's all dependent really of what I can get from the nursery from year to year. But it's also reminding people that as your trees grow in, other plants join the native growing in process, and that can include coneflowers and black-eyed Susans, but it also includes Joe Pyeweed and milkweed and jewelweed. And these plants make selling buffers harder because the name weed is in the plant, and people misunderstand that a weed is something terrible. And what a weed really is just a plant out of place. And for example, this soybean field has some corn growing in it randomly. It probably fell off of the cedar when it was planted, but this corn is acting as a weed. Nobody sees corn as a weed because they think it's a plant that we use. But when it's not growing in the right place, it's a weed. And I try to tell people that about their riparian buffers and the things that grow in, that a weed is just a plant out of place. We're usually planting these by hand. There are some little hand drills or different things that we can put in, but they're put in with tree shelters and volunteers. If I'm doing it on my own, I could hire a professional contractor that'll go in. Usually size dictates how big of a buffer. About a 5 acre or less I can manage with my Western Pennsylvania Conservancy team and some volunteers, but we get 5-10 acre buffers. It's easier to contract out. Is every place suitable for a buffer? We may want to ask why it's open. I have had very willing landowners that want to have a buffer put in, but then the site's open for a reason, whether it's a gas well, a power line. You want to maintain excitement about planting these open areas, but you also have to be realistic that some places it just doesn't fit. But we can balance it out if there's a right of way that can be incorporated with a livestock crossing or something. There's a balance that you can still plant buffers and work with right of ways. But repairing buffers are not just a plant and walk away activity. This is on planting days. So we have about half the buffer planted, the other half the volunteers are going to go over there. But there's some maintenance that goes with planting buffers. And that's one of the things when I talk to landowners now is that I'm not just asking them to take care of their buffer. We have some time through our grants to go back in following years and do a little bit of maintenance, straighten the tree tubes. There's a few things here and there that need done. The trees are pretty amazing, and they want to be up and out of these tree shelters. With a little bit of care and time, we get a buffer that grows in about 7 to 10 years. Even if the tree tubes don't get taken off, they're designed to split and then they can be taken off. And we have canopy closure, and that's the overall goal for planting and repairing areas. So again, back to, are you ready to talk about buffers? This is really, think about what I said today, and are you able to go and talk to someone about a buffer? How about you go talk to 3 people? Pick 2 people you know about buffers so you can get the words flowing, and then pick a random person and say, hey, have you ever thought about planting trees along your stream? You'd be amazed in the conversations that happen. I talk buffers pretty much everywhere I go. My son's a hockey kid, and now all the hockey moms know how to plant trees along streams. So it's amazing when you can have those conversations. Well, if there's any questions about the program, like I said, this was just a quick version. I'm happy to answer them, happy to talk buffers on any level, share stories, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Is there any questions from folks that are participants? You can either raise your hand, put it in the chat, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask directly. I have a quick question, Alicia. Well, there might be others that are using the chat function here. I've done a lot of plantings, but I've never seen sort of that look like a 3x3 foot weed cloth that you're putting around each sapling in a tree tube. Is that's I mean, weed control, but what's that being held down with?
So that weed mat is being held down with some sod pins in the corners. The mat is actually split, and this is a product that's biodegradable in about 5 years. And it's, again, helps with the weed control, soil moisture, and just giving that seedling a little bit more of a chance. It's an alternative to places that might want to don't want to herbicide along their trees. Anything we can do to help reduce the competition for the first couple of years to get that tree growing. And that's just, those weed mats are one of the options.
That's great. Any other questions from participants? Looks like in the chat, it says our property is next to a stormwater drainage creek. I'd like to plant it to be a better buffer, even though it's not technically our property.
So that's where you would start having conversations with the landowner. Sometimes landowners just don't have time or figure out what you need to, who wants to do it, and even just baby steps, a couple of things to put in there to show that you're not going to cause more flooding, because that's one of the big concerns when you start planting trees. I've been pointed as the sole cause of why Pittsburgh floods because I'm planting trees along streams. That's a pretty big charge, and I wish I could control it, but that's, people are unsure of what trees do for the environment.
Thank you so much, Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move us along here and introduce our next speaker, Luke Bobnar. Luke, if you want to pull up your slides, he is a watershed project manager, also with WPC, holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology, Ecology, and Evolutionary Biology from Clarion University, with more than 14 years of professional experience in aquatic and terrestrial monitoring and restoration. He's been certified by the U.S. Forest Service and Trout Unlimited for large wood structures for aquatic ecosystem restoration. Also worked a little bit in some stream simulation design approach for providing aquatic organism passage at road stream crossings, and has done maintenance of dirt and gravel roads. So welcome, Luke, and I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks everybody for having me. I always enjoy listening to Alicia talk about repairing buffers and planting trees along streams. But I'm here to talk to you today about how important they are to be dead and down in streams, and not just in the stream, but in the valley. Kind of picture that as an ecosystem. And where a lot of this work goes on is in what's in forested land, particularly the Allegheny National Forest. This is in northwestern Pennsylvania. I'm in the Ridgeway office of the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. That's right where that little yellow star is, and kind of work and play all over that big green area up there. And his great-grandpa Alphonse always used to say, if you don't know where to start, go back to the beginning. And the beginning in this case is pre-colonization America, on the East Coast and Pennsylvania especially, we had an old growth forest. That's why we're called Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods. When those big trees would die, they would fall into streams if they were nearby, and they had a huge impact on, aquatic and riparian ecosystem function. But, we were a growing nation and we needed lumber to build America. And the way you got that to market in the olden days before roads was on rivers and streams. And there were even many of our major rivers and waterways were declared highways in the 1840s, 1850s. And there were these improvement companies that would go pull out log jams and blow up boulders and waterfalls. It was great for industrial transport of timber downstream, but it was not so great for aquatic ecosystems and their functions. And it's left us with this kind of twofold legacy, one a cultural legacy and one an ecological legacy, that wood is bad in streams, and it's not. You could look at that picture on the screen and think, man, that's a beautiful picture of East Branch Tionesta in the Allegheny National Forest. But if you do any amount of fishing, you're walking past that 150 yards of shallow, flat water. There's nothing there. There's no structure. And then and that's a result of one of, taking stuff out of the stream, but two, the industrial clear cutting that took trees right up to the stream bank. So for the past 200 years, we don't have that cohort of trees that should have been living, growing, dying, falling in. And even if that yellow birch over on the right-hand side would fall in, there's nothing there to buffer it. So when the big water comes, it washes downstream and then, can wind up on infrastructure, and it reinforces that negative cultural perception of wood in streams, that it's bad and it's going to cause flooding. Well, that's what it does, but it's not necessarily a bad thing unless it's, impacting infrastructure and property. And it's not just me and hippies saying that wood is good in streams. There's a lot of scientific studies out there that examined the amount of wood in old growth streams, OG, or second growth streams, 2G, whether you're looking at number of pieces or volumetrically. This was a study in Pennsylvania on some of our old growth over in Cook's Forest and from 2010. And there's more comprehensive studies like the Warren study in New York and New Hampshire that say, yeah, in undisturbed forests that were, quote, natural, there's a ton more wood there, and there should be more wood in our second growth forested streams. My personal favorite example of historic wood in streams is the Great Raft on the Red River in Louisiana. Google that, look it up sometime. You're looking for a half hour or 2 days to kill. It was this giant log jam, a couple 100 miles long. They cleared it for navigation. A couple of years later, it reformed upstream, and then they cleared that one. When they finally got all the wood out of the stream, local water tables fell 25 feet. People lost their wells, lakes dried up. Wood is incredibly important to aquatic ecosystems. It helps hold the grade, and then that water being there influences everything else. And part of the work that I do is putting wood back into streams, especially in remote areas, first and second order streams, and just trying to return its functional role for a variety of benefits. One of which is just cover. If you go fishing, you know that fish love cover, and wood is their natural cover in a lot of cases. But it also, you get those fine limbs in there, and it helps to hold back the leaves so they're not downstream in some reservoir taking up flood capacity. They're on site getting eaten by bugs that are then getting eaten by fish. It has it'll backwater water up a little bit and create a backwater pool, and then also create a plunge pool on the downstream side. The water goes down, digs out the pool, grabs stuff, rocks, sediment, gravel, and as it's leaving that pool, it's losing energy, drops those gravels out, and they're the perfect substrate for our wild trout to spawn in. Again, backing that water up, it can often re-access side channels or carve side channels that are perfect habitat for those young of the year fish. Once they hatch out of the spawning gravels, they can move into smaller side channels where there's less fish predation on them. It's also great for amphibians. And even if it's not going into a side channel, in a remote area, a remote forested watershed, if you're putting water on the floodplain, that's water that's going to soak into the ground, get discharged as cool base flow, and it's not going to come out as and it's not going to be down in your favorite town downstream. It's going to be flooding up in the woods, which that's where it's supposed to be. And then also just thinking very broadly, when a tree goes down, from the root ball to the bowl up to the fine branches, that's an incredible amount of habitat diversity, whether you're an aquatic or a terrestrial species. Thinking about how we do this, one of the easiest ways is we're all doing it right now. It's just natural tree mortality. Um, but and also don't take them out if it's possible, leave them in there. Smaller streams, you can do it by hand. As you get up in size, you might want to use a manual winch. But once you get over about 40 feet of bank full width, we like to bring out the Tonka toys and secure our wood so that we know that it's not going to go downstream and cause flooding in areas we don't want it to go to. And as you work on even larger rivers, definitely involve an engineer and make sure your stuff is pretty bomb-proof. But no matter where we're working, the common basic goal is to take, something like this that doesn't have any wood in it. It's shallow, it's flat, fairly homogeneous, and really diversify it, return wood as a functional piece to the channel and valley ecosystem. We've been doing this for about 10 years and primarily partnering with the Allegheny National Forest. They started it in, say, the late 2000s, and along with them, we've completed about 43 miles of it on the ANF. We're also starting to work with the Pennsylvania Game Commission and have worked on a number of game lands for about 14 miles worth of work. Our state DCNR, or the State Forestry Agency, we've worked with them a little bit. Also working with municipal water suppliers to help them, keep cool, clean water coming into their reservoirs, and also a little bit on some private land and with the Army Corps of Engineers. When we think about working in those bigger systems, that's a big project. That's a lot of permitting, fundraising, engineering time. So it makes sense that that's the least amount of this work that we've done. When we can, I like to get out with a group of people and do really targeted large wood additions to very specific stream sections. Like, there's a side channel we want to reactivate, or it's a little bit bigger stream and we need to maybe uproot a root ball with a grip hoist. And especially youth groups like, the Student Conservation Association or Youth Conservation Corps. It's great to get out there and put the kids to work, and they also learn a good bit. And then the bulk of our work has been what we call directional felling or chop and drop. It's just taking a tree and aiming it with your chainsaw and getting it to land where you want it to. And like I said, just reintroducing it as a functional piece in that system. This is one we completed last year with the help of some Boy Scouts. The fine limbs are just as important as the big wood to get in there. They help hold back leaves and everything like we talked about. And when I'm out there cutting, I often think of myself as like a straight line wind event. It's between straight line wind events and, the occasional low grade tornado. It's a very natural disturbance mechanism that adds wood to our streams. And it's something that I try to mimic when I'm out working. When we're out with the grip hoist, a little bit of a time lapse of a project we did a few years ago. With a crew, we're able to move trees around up to, say, maybe 16, 17-inch diameter, cut the roots with hand tools, and then we're moving it into the stream with that hand-powered winch. The goal of this project was to take up a little bit of the space on the far side of that boulder to increase scour on the near side of the boulder, as well as trap mobile woody material in the system. So here we're taking another tree down and letting it be solid and in place. This is a before picture. And then immediately after. And then 3 years after, I was back, and we're definitely getting recruitment of the wildwood floating around in the stream, as well as some scour on the right side of that boulder. When we do it with heavy equipment, it takes a lot more time, a lot more money, so we're very calculated about where we do it. This is a research watershed, Little Arnett Run in the National Forest, where an old railroad grade smashed the stream channel up against the valley wall and didn't let it access all these old little flood channels that it had, historically had access to. So we came up with a plan to install wood as grade control to increase the stream bed and water elevation. And we also excavated through that berm to allow it to access those floodplain channels. And we're not just going around marveling at all the sweet stuff. We are, doing some monitoring on these projects. Specifically in Little Arnott was our treatment watershed, and then Cherry Run is our control watershed, where we didn't do anything but monitor. We looked at trout redds, tree canopy, and then also monitored wetlands within those watersheds. If you're unfamiliar with a trout red, this is two wild brook trout. They're probably about 6-7 inches long. Digging a red, it's a nest that's made in the gravel, those little pea gravels, spawning gravels that I talked about earlier. The female goes on her side, digs, deposits eggs. The male comes up, bumps her, deposits, fertilizer, and then she goes upstream, digs again, which covers the eggs and makes another hole for it. We had concern raised that people said, hey, if you're taking all the canopy cover out, are the fish still going to be willing to do that? We said, hey, we'll study it. We took a canopy cover reading every 50 meters as well as a meter downstream of every nest that we found. And we found that, boy, those trout really don't care if there's canopy cover there or not. What they really like is those gravels. And if those gravels, you can see in Cherry Run, they were even breeding in the middle of a power line with just a minimal amount of canopy cover. And for reference, construction was in the late 2021 and early 22. So we really didn't see much of a reduction at all in canopy cover, whether it was throughout the reach or above the fish nests, and saw really no influence to willingness to breed with that change in canopy cover. I came from private consulting, so wetlands are super exciting for me. They're really important for watershed function, and we were hoping to see, some reactivation of old wetlands, and we're wanting to know how it would change. So in this area, we found in Little Arnott Run, there were 9 new wetlands that developed. One wetland we lost. It was kind of borderline anyways, and it was mainly there because of the shade of some hemlocks. 2 of our identified wetlands became stream channels, and 5 were kind of like little pocket wetlands that got absorbed when one wetland grew. And the long and short of it is, we gained a 1/4 acre of wetland area in 8 months. Wetlands take years to develop. We did construction in August and September of 2021, and we were back out surveying for wetlands in June and July of 22, and we found a 1/4 acre of wetland gains. This is a long-term monitoring project, and I'm super excited to get out there again soon, but we'll see how funding over the next couple years goes. And I wanted to finish up with this. This is one of our major areas in Little Arnott that we cut the berm on the left-hand side there that you can kind of see the water going through. Downstream of there, it was hemlock and beech brush, so upland before our project, but installed wood as grade controls, habitat and structure, and so on and so forth. And so the following year, like I said, we were back in there doing wetland surveys. In this area, in the middle of the screen, you can see that it was upland brush. I see fish swimming around, and this is young of the year wild trout. There was 6 or 8 of them there, and that's, an inch and a half long fish. And then later on, this whole area became one of those new wetlands. So our floodplain was functioning in a pretty natural way. And with that, I hope that you come away from this thinking like, man, wood's not just good for on the side of the creek. It's good to be down in the creek, and, maybe smile about it. And that's what I got to say about that.
Thank you, Luke. There was one question in the chat here while we transition to our next speaker, but how do you balance the needs of the paddling community for safe routes with the need for water, woody debris for water quality?
So we're doing this not in like those super high gradient areas of where you might have the whitewater paddling community. It's most effective in like a 1 to maybe a 7% slope watershed, which whitewater is usually quite a bit higher. And then also if it's on a major river system, we're not putting in strainers. You keep it to the side.
Right. So kind of the smaller headwater streams and
Yeah, that's primarily where we do most of our work. Yep.
okay. Thank you. I liked all your animation and your pictures. It was cool. We're a little short on time here, so I am going to transition over to our last two presenters that are going to be co-presenting. We have Olivia Perfetti and Clara Kitango. If there are any questions for any of our presenters afterwards, they have put their name and contact information in the chat, and feel free to follow up. So Olivia is the Municipal Engagement Manager at the Allegheny County Conservation District. She assists municipalities in assessing the natural resources and services and works alongside the Pittsburgh Canopy Alliance to grow the region's trees canopy. She holds a BS in environmental science from the University of Michigan and an MS in public policy and management from Carnegie Mellon University. And Clara is the tree equity manager at Tree Pittsburgh. She works with communities, especially with those with low canopy or our environmental justice communities. She holds a Master's of Public Policy and Management from the Heinz College of Information Sciences and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon. And throughout her career, she has worked as a teacher, sustainability fellow with the Student Conservation Association, program coordinator at Carnegie Mellon, and the policy intern with the city of Pittsburgh. So I'd like to welcome both of our remaining speakers here and turn that over to them now. Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks to the Ohio River Basin Alliance and its many partners for having us and hosting this great series. Clara and I are really excited to talk to you today about our planting efforts here in Allegheny County, which, if you're not familiar, is the county which has the city of Pittsburgh. So moving along. Today we're going to give a quick overview of Allegheny County Conservation District and Tree Pittsburgh, where we work. I'll talk a bit about the water quality benefits of trees broadly, and then Clara will get more into the Canopy Alliance and kind of collaboration, how that works on the ground, and some challenges that we've been working through. So to start with a bit about ACCD, we work to preserve, protect, and restore Allegheny County's natural resources. We have regulatory authority delegated by the state to operate Chapter 102, Erosion and Sediment Control, as well as Chapter 105, Dam Safety and Waterway Management, as well as livestock compliance and regulations. In addition to our regulatory work, we have a program team and a variety of programs. We develop watershed plans and implement stormwater projects and green infrastructure in priority areas. We assist farmers in implementing best management practices on their land, and also urban growers to access resources such as soil testing. Our dirt, gravel, and low volume road program provides grants for improvements to qualifying roads that are impacting water quality in the region. And then finally, we help farmers place permanent conservation easements on farmland, which ensures the protection of our agricultural land for generations to come. I'll let Clara take this slide.
Thank you. And Tree Pittsburgh is an environmental nonprofit in the city of Pittsburgh, and we were established in 2008 and came out of a conversation between the Pittsburgh Shade Tree Commission and the city of Pittsburgh. But our mission is to protect and restore the city's urban forest through community tree planting and tree care, education, advocacy, and land conservation. We believe all people have a right to benefit from the many health, environmental, and social services that trees provide. And our vision is to really support a more resilient urban forest by inspiring and engaging people to maintain, plant, and protect trees. We believe that a greener region will create more vital communities for generations to come. Thank you. You can move to the next slide, Liv.
Sounds good. So Yeah, like I mentioned, I live in Pittsburgh and I primarily work in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. So when I think about the connection of trees to water quality, my own personal lens is mainly thinking about reducing flooding and dealing with stormwater. Pittsburgh is, situated between three major rivers, the Monongahela, the Allegheny, and the Ohio. It's very hilly, so we do have a lot of problems with flooding, and combined sewer overflow in our rivers. So that's the main lens through which I view this work, but I know we're all coming together from like many different states and many different areas. So I wanted to share some broader statistics that show the many water quality benefits of trees. I think they help make the case for why trees are so important to our communities and really serve as critical infrastructure. So even if you're very familiar with this issue, I hope the statistics will kind of be useful to have in your back pocket. So to start, on average, forest canopy intercepts about 10 to 40% of annual rainfall, depending on species, time of year, and precipitation rates per storm. In other words, how much rain is coming down per minute or hour during the storm. So that's some information kind of on average at the forest level. At the state level in Pennsylvania, our forests absorb about 24 inches of the state's average annual rainfall, which is 40 inches, through evapotranspiration. So that process includes both the evaporation of water from soil and leaves and also transpiration, the process by which plants absorb water through their roots and then release its vapor through their leaves. So really the majority of average annual rainfall in this state is absorbed by our forests. So we can see the difference in soil infiltration rate of water on a site-by-site basis, as well as at the forest and state level. So for example, one study followed the conversion of a forested site to suburban grass, and that site went from infiltrating 12.4 inches of rain per hour to only 4.4 inches of rain per hour, which is, only about a third as much. I think we often see grass as green, but it really doesn't provide much ecological benefit when compared with native and woody vegetation. So, even worse than grass, as you can imagine, is the parking lot. Volume of runoff from 1 acre of paved parking is about the same volume of runoff from 36 acres of forest. So the forest has about 36 times the infiltration potential of pavement. And that's, not even considering the pollution that is part of runoff from parking lots, which can have a detrimental impact on our water quality as well. So far, I've spoken a lot about forested areas, but individual trees in urban and suburban environments have an important impact as well. So in our own neighborhoods, one single tree can intercept between 500 and 760 gallons of water per year if it's deciduous, and more than 4,000 gallons if it's a mature conifer. So our street trees, the trees that we have in our front and backyards, they also play a very important role in our own neighborhoods. So for the final statistic, Alicia spoke, a lot about riparian buffers in wonderful detail. So just to share one more statistic, that hopefully is helpful. Sure, many of us are aware of the impacts that nutrient pollution has on, the Ohio River Basin and Gulf of Mexico. So forest buffers on farmland can really mitigate that runoff significantly. This one study found that on average, forest buffers reduce up to 88% of nitrate pollution and up to 76% of phosphorus pollution on farms. And that photo is actually a riparian buffer that ACCD planted on a local farm for this very reason. So in summary, trees play a significant role in reducing flooding, improving water quality across a lot of different landscapes, forested, urban, suburban, and agricultural sites as well. And now I will turn it over to Clara.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Pittsburgh Canopy Alliance and the work that we've been doing to support the canopy, as well as share some examples of how partners have worked to engage some riparian plantings in Pittsburgh. So we'll move to the next slide. So the Canopy Alliance in Pittsburgh is made up of over 20 nonprofit organizations and government agencies all across the county. So even if it says Pittsburgh, it's for the whole county. The purpose of this group is to really support the growth of the urban tree canopy, but we don't only look at urban areas. A lot of our partners deal with actually planting in parks and institutional grounds, if it's like college campuses, actual school properties. So the whole goal is to increase that canopy. And since 2020, we've been able to plant over 15,000 trees, and this doesn't even include numbers from the last year. So we've been really doing this in a more collective way. Each organization has their own funding, but as we move to the next slide, we have a group, this particular group of folks were able to submit an application for the Inflation Reduction Act funding. So friends at Allegheny County Conservation District, Allegheny Goatscape, and all the other folks on this slide are people that we've been working together to bring some of the services that I'll be talking about in the following slide. So yes, as I just mentioned, the funding for our trees was coming through the $8 million Inflation Reduction Act funding that is through the USDA Forest Service. This has really given us a lot of capacity to go in spaces in communities where there are no resources to do some of this work, but that actually need a lot of this work the most. Some of these are like small municipalities like Rankin or Glassport, and also being able to spread out even across larger ones that have pockets of areas that would really benefit from having such funding infiltrate. It allows us to bring workforce development, which was a very big impact from this grant, and we hope that it can continue. So we'll move to the next slide. Some of the offerings in the Alliance include technical assistance, site prep and planting, and maintenance. So as far as technical assistance, we're able to do different things like street tree inventory, actually planning out different projects from greening projects all the way through to more technical scale work that Allegheny County Conservation District does. We're also able to support with protective ordinances, tree risk assessments, GIS mapping, testing, and a lot of education. And I really like the part where we help communities with actually caring for young trees, maintaining mature trees, that is helping with actually pruning some of the larger trees that may be a big hindrance for folks even wanting to have trees on their property. So we're trying to mitigate cutting large trees by providing this opportunity for folks to get support to prune some of their larger trees. And then we also do some site prep, which includes removing invasive plants, removal of trash, mulching, and just, doing tree planting itself. So in the next slide, I want to just share, actually the following one, I want to share just one collaboration that happened between Tree Pittsburgh and DCNR. We're working closely with the Allegheny County Park Rangers. And this was a project that happened between 2017 and 2019. And the goals of the project were to really plant a riparian buffer zone around several sites in Allegheny County. Some of the sites included the Colwood Park, Seldom Seen Park, Little Pine Creek, and then some areas in Heartwood Acres Park. So as you can see the picture on the right of the slide, that is a planting that happened with park rangers. And yes, we can see there's a lot of erosion happening on that riverbank, and we're trying to really increase the buffer to go farther back. I did not specifically do this project. My colleague Jake Malofsky was running this project with a companion at the county park. So if you want more details to see how it's going, we'd be happy to follow up on that. We do a lot of riparian buffer plantings, not just this particular site. And sometimes we find serendipitous ways to do this. For example, we've done a tree planting in the South Fayette School District, where we were just originally coming into the site to plant trees around the school property, and then found that there was a stream which was the head of an actual watershed, and were able to speak with the school to actually have us plant trees along that stream, which was opening up into the watershed, just serendipitously. We weren't looking for it, but it kind of happened naturally. I think the last slide is just talking a little bit more around this Little Pine Creek 2019 planting. It shows you the map of the scale. This particular map was designed by my colleague Jake. There are different zones, different layers that show you different types of trees that were planted both from as close to the river and all the way back to the different zone numbers. Mixture of a lot of the trees that Alicia was talking about earlier were included in this planting, and a lot of what we've discovered in the end, this particular planting was done with the park rangers, and they're supporting with the care of these trees. It's always the biggest challenge is after you put trees in, like the care is the biggest challenge for them. So the final slide just shows we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've been experiencing doing this work. As I've mentioned, a lot of it is maintenance. A lot of trees get washed away after you've planted them. So being able to monitor the plantings that have been done on those riparian buffer sites and how they're doing is a crucial aspect, and having good partners is important. Also just identifying good sites and figuring out who is the best person in terms of how do you convert a property owner from not wanting a tree on the riverbed to actually wanting one. Some of my colleagues have had big challenges with that too, where folks are actually deciding to cut down trees versus keep them alive on the riverbanks, which creates a lot of frustration. And folks just deciding maybe they want flowers more than they want trees. And how do we do those conversions? So in listening to Alicia's presentation, I learned a lot about different ways to kind of combat some of these challenges, to turn them into opportunity for the trees. So I think I'll pass it back to you, Olivia.
Sounds good. Thanks, Clara. I think we just have our contact information, so definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to talk more, and I'll turn it back over to Jen.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Clara. I want to thank all of our speakers today. And if there are any questions right now, we have 1 minute left for Olivia or Clara. Just a reminder, our next webinar will be March 26th, and that'll be focused on our student voices, where we invite graduate researchers and undergraduate researchers from universities across the basin to present their work. And that'll be March 26th, and you can register on Orsenco's website as you did today. So are there any questions for Clara or Olivia? I have one question, Clara, on the zones 3, 2, 1, kind of getting closer to the stream. So those are different types of trees. You're doing maybe live postings in that zone 1, and then maybe shrubs, and then sycamores and river birch type trees in the zone 3s.
Yes. And all of them would have, I remember we did this planting and each tree had different ribbons. So we make sure that the right tree is going to the right location. Like I said, I did not do this particular planting, so I don't want to speak over it, but my colleague Jake has a really extensive list of those particular species, and the park rangers actually planted all of those trees, and some of them with our staff. But we did do a mix, getting from the softer to the more woody plants farther away from the river. Yeah.
What's your typical width from the creek outward?
That's a great question.
Probably different.
I don't have the answer.
Each site.
Yeah, depending on the site. Yep.
Some
sites are narrow enough that you can't go too far back into. But if you're looking at, because a lot of the sites that we're planting with the park rangers are in actual parks, and so we're not dealing with the property owner necessarily. We're dealing with the county park, so it's a little easier. I believe we're going to start a project, funding permitting, with ACCD, where we'll be looking more at actual property owners and how do you target that space. So that will also look different depending on the amount of space available.
Well, thank you, everyone. Great work, and we'll see you in March. Bye-bye.